him so much, we asked him to come back with Sean Henschke. Sean is a Wear It Purple board director, also an LGBTQI peer worker with Headspace, and a community liaison. I'm going to leave Sean to introduce the rest of themselves and have a discussion about what Wear It Purple Day is. So good morning, Sean. Thanks for coming.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here again. It was a wonderful discussion last time, and I look forward to having further opportunities to share what this year's Wear It Purple is about. This is the first time we've done You're the First One Off the Rank. So this is the first time I'm speaking about this year's Wear It Purple Day. So if I'm not as precision on message with the website in the same way other
you'll
people
be fine.
It's because it's the first time, and I'll get another good 30 of these before the end of by the time we get to Purple Day. So
you were very popular last year. I remember last year you were. I mean, I was just only telling one of our staff a little while ago that you had so many events on the actual day that you started the event, I think, from your car.
Yes.
And then you sort of ran into the house and then you transferred from your phone to the car. So it was wonderful. But no, thank you very much for coming.
Simpler. I got to sleep in today, and then I got to join.
Oh, wonderful.
But I'm meeting on Ghana land here today, and this year's Wear It Purple theme is Your Passion, Your Pride. I know the young person who coined the phrase the first time when they were talking about how when they attend Pride events and things like that, that there's so much more to them, and there's so much more to the community of where we connect and the ways we connect. And they were talking about how, like, some people just kind of were talking about what it was like at school, and they were like, well, this person's gay and you're gay, so therefore you'll be friends. But they actually have different interests.
So you love that?
So, and I've had lots of circumstances like that, and sometimes it does work. Sometimes I'm like, cool, we have enough in common that this just happened to work out. Great. But there's also a lot more to being a part of the LGBTIQ plus community that is about that. So we listened to that young person. That young person kind of was like, well, why don't we celebrate your passions and what makes you prideful, as well as like your identity? You know, like you're an LGBT person, but you're also a bunch more. And it's about also celebrating all the other things that make up who you are and what you do in your life. And that's what this year's theme basically is. And it's an opportunity to share all the other things you do. What's interesting for me is most of the time all the other speakers are going to talk about all the stuff they do outside the LGBT community, but my day job is my gay job. So it means that most of the time I am doing this type of stuff 24/7. So either I'm doing LGBT mentoring for young people at Headspace Center under 25, or I'm doing community liaison. Since you last saw me, I've traveled around South Australia having conversations with people for a research project that comes out next week on Monday, where we're going to publish a report of over 150 interviews with LGBT people, the biggest like deep dive into the experiences of LGBT people in South Australia. We went everywhere from Ceduna to Roxby Downs across South Australia, all into the regions, having meaningful conversations. So I'm really looking forward to how that report will come out. But that's what I've been doing outside of that, and that's the type of stuff that I love doing. So that's, I guess, my passion outside of this, but also it kind of still is this. So but it might be I thought maybe I ask a question of you, Evan, of what your passions are and things like that.
Look, I'm passionate about a lot of things, right? So I'm obviously very passionate about diversity and inclusion. And I was only discussing this in my classroom yesterday, that sometimes we, the diversity and inclusion, flag gets waved a lot by some businesses nowadays. And sometimes it feels a little bit tokenistic. It seems that, sometimes businesses, really promote this around Pride Month, or they promote it around either Hobbit or Wear It Purple. And it really is something that needs to be ongoing, right? So it's one of those things that needs to be ongoing. And I know here at Torrens, we are a very, very diverse workplace. Our student population is also very, very diverse. We have a lot of international students, especially here in our Adelaide campus, but across all our campuses, really. And we have lots of different cultures represented, lots of different religions, lots of different sexualities, lots of different genders as well, which is wonderful. And I know that one of our key, I'll just ask someone to mute themselves, please. Very loud. Charles? No. Wow, that's very loud. Thank you, Charles. Well, Charles has entered the room. Thank you, Charles, Brisbane, for coming into the room. So one of the key focuses, I guess, that we have here at Torrens, and I've been working with our former campus director here in Adelaide, and that is about trying to create a very safe and inclusive environment for all of our LGBTQI students, but also for our staff, right? So it's not just about our students. We obviously have a massive staff here as well. So I want to know from you, Sean, like that's my passion. So I'm going to now fire it back to you. What do you think are some of the key strategies and some of the things that we can do across, I guess, both levels? So what can we do as staff to create that wonderful sense of belonging and that sense of safety and security for our students? And what can we also do to create that same feeling of belonging and community for our staff as well?
I have noticed in the last like year, a lot of identity politics stuff is in the media, and there's a lot of people that are very like, there's a lot of criticism of identity and labels and where we exist in the community that have come from a lot of, I guess, more conservative media sources or political parties at the moment, and that has shaped a lot of the conversation around the LGBT community of late. And as we transition from like, I guess, a post-marriage equality type conversation, and we're talking more about the day-to-day lives. And I always have this approach is that like I'm not going to understand every identity in the community. I'm not going to understand all of their experiences. I'm not going to be an expert in you. You are the expert of you. And normally, if someone asks me to do something that makes them feel more included, or a change that I can make in a process that makes them feel more included, I basically ask myself, why not? As opposed to why. And if it has no harm on the like in a sense of on anyone, and it doesn't require anything uh particularly difficult, I normally just do my best to make sure that person's included. And it's kind of just this principle of is there a really high burden for this person to prove who they are and what they need, or is it an opportunity that's given to everybody to explain how they would like to be felt, how they could feel safe and welcome in the whether it be the workplace or as a student. And that's kind of my approach, is because some people would like the terminology used on their official paperwork to be changed. Some people
Yeah.
just want to be able to be included when media promotion comes out. They want to be able to see someone who looks like them. There's all going to be different experiences as why people will feel included and cared for. But if you just go with the approach of why not, and let's give things a go and see how we can support these people, it's a really positive way. Policy is really useful to provide structure for these things, but sometimes policy can also be the barrier for these things. And most organizations have a routine going, like when they update policies, and always just having an opportunity to consult, is this inclusive of all communities? And that's kind of the first step from like an organization level that
Sure.
we normally approach. But if it's just someone you meet and you bump into and they use a terminology that you're not familiar with, or that it's not necessarily words that you're used to using, I always approach the why not and give it a go. And people will be patient for people who give it a go. And a lot of people I talk to who are allies, and they're really trying, and they're going, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm trying to do my best.
Yeah, that's right.
Most of the time, they're not the problem. They're not the people that they're actually bothered by. It's the people that go, you've asked nicely for me to do this thing, and I'm just not going to because I don't want to, because I don't want you to feel welcome or included. But at the same time, you're going to call someone called Robert Bob, etc.
Yeah.
Like everyone
Do you
can
think
have,
it's as do
yeah,
you
go.
think it's as I mean, I don't disagree at all with what you said. I
Mm.
really agree. But do you think it's a sign of do you think it's a sign of not acceptance, or do you think it's a sign of sort of arrogance when people sometimes make that? Because I know that sometimes people make the decision not to try, and I know that people do genuinely try, right? Of course, right? But I've noticed that there are some people who just don't genuinely try. I'm like, are you just being arrogant, or are you just not with it? Like, are you just not being very smart?
There's a lot of people who there are two main columns of people that I regularly interact with who are barriers to a lot of support for community members. And
Yep.
the first one is someone who has been also harmed by the really structured, rigid expectations of gender and sexuality. And they've spent
Yes.
their entire life being like, I must be this way. And they've worked really hard to perform, whether it be masculinity or femininity. And they're doing this like, I must conform to these
Yeah.
roles. And they've worked really hard on it. And it's kind of that like, well, I used to do this, so my kids should too approach,
Yep.
and kind of passing on that intergenerational experience. And so they can be a lot of barriers. And actually, it's because they've struggled on it and they think that's a part of life and therefore it should continue. And when you actually give them the opportunity of, how does this actually impact you, and give them the moment to reflect on whether they are actually harmed by performing this expectation. Like, I go, what are things that you enjoy that you probably wouldn't do because you are a man or a woman? And I ask those questions, and a lot of people would be like, actually, I really did like doing this thing when I was a kid, but I was told not to. Maybe I should give that a go. And the moment you make it about them and everybody in the community, it kind of takes away that personalization, and it doesn't make it seem that radical that someone just wants to have a certain label or be able to participate in something they normally wouldn't. So that's one. And then the other um, demographic of people who are just confused by it. They've just never
Yeah,
experienced it. And to them, something foreign and unusual can be scary. And if they've lived in a world where things are very similar and familiar and you know what to do, changing the script up puts you in a place where you're like, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to go, we don't need to talk about that or think about this because it's just easier to not. And that can be seen as arrogance. It can be from a place of, I don't want to put in the effort. I don't want to change. I'm happy with how things are. It benefits me. I'm not going to put out my effort to benefit you. But sometimes it can just be like ignorance and misunderstanding. So there's like
sure.
a spectrum of reasons. And it doesn't, I'm not doing this to say that the reasons are justified and that people
Yeah,
should
of
go out
course.
of their way to support people, but understanding why kind of takes sometimes the hate out of it and sometimes
Yeah,
take it to, oh, their experience has been challenging, and unfortunately their way of dealing with it is to pass it on as opposed to
yeah,
acknowledge it themselves. And I've seen through having that type of conversation with friends, family about where they sit, as opposed to going, this is who I am and what I do. I actually come to approach, especially working with parents of young people, I go, how has gender or sexuality impacted your life? Like, have you ever felt limited by this? And actually asking them the questions, they're like, oh, I've never thought about that. Maybe. And then it starts a conversation from their story and them talking about what they're like. And then they can draw the connections and parallels to their kid or to someone else in their life, or you if you're the person having that conversation. And it can, so coming from an approach of similarity can challenge that, but it doesn't mean that, people can be um, assholes if they want
yeah.
to.
No, it's
You
true. And
can't
I
stop
think
that.
I, yeah, of course. And I think you're right. I think understanding or at least respecting the terminology and the pronouns that people use is certainly a very big step. I've seen sort of, people that I know feel gone from feeling very, very excluded in community and even social settings, even amongst their peers, to feeling, almost the exact opposite, right? They've just gone to feel very, very included. Even if someone makes a mistake and they can go, hey, look, that's not my pronoun. This is what my pronoun is. Just by the person actually trying, they can see that genuinely trying, it makes a big difference. And they've gone from feeling very excluded, very included. And I know here at the university, we're trying certainly very hard on the student level. We're trying to encourage our students to use their pronouns when they're using our digital learning systems, for example, and when they introduce themselves, and to use them on their signatures. And we're also obviously encouraging our staff to do the same thing. There's a few operational issues at the moment with some of that. We're using pronouns on some of our platforms that we use on a staff level, but certainly in our signatures, I've seen it a lot more in the last 12 months, which is fantastic. Staff actually embracing the use of putting their pronouns in signatures. So really to promote who they are, which is wonderful. And also trying to announce to people, this is how I'd like to be referred to and known, which is really good.
Yeah, and one of the things that like I kind of do approach of is, in your situation, if you could give every student or every person you engage with a cake every single day, like just as a gift,
Yeah,
you'd be like, sure, if I had to put minimal effort by just saying a word and everyone got cake, that's kind of what the experience is for a lot of
that's
people that
very
want the
true.
terminology we to use. It's like this wonderful gift that someone's given them by going, wow, you actually put in the effort. I appreciate that. And I always just go, there is an opportunity to give a kindness to someone, and why not take it? Because it's going to make them feel welcome and safe, especially if you're one of the few people that do it. Um, and I'm just kind of like, it's a really, really easy way to make someone feel happy without much cost or
Absolutely.
effort. And that's such a like an
Yeah.
easy, cool thing to do, as opposed to like having to put in an effort. Like to make a lot of people, like if I want to make my mom happy, it's a much more higher bar than just using people's pronouns and
Yeah.
etc. So like, how about we just meet the quite simple request? That's kind of my approach. Is it's not that difficult, and it's kind of like, as I said with a cake, if you make someone a cake and it's a bit mushy and it's a bit not well
It's
done,
still
people
nice though, isn't it?
appreciate
Right?
the effort,
It's like, oh, you made me a
so
cake. It's
give it
nice.
a
Yeah,
go.
I
And
agree.
each time you bake a cake, you're probably going to get better. So that's kind of the approach that I give, is that, yeah, they gave it a go. it was a bit not right, but you know what? They put in the effort and I
Yeah,
appreciate it. And next time they'll get better. Or if you keep making and then there's also like time passes, and if you keep making a really bad cake, at some point they might be like, "Hi, just letting you know that this is a lot of like, how about we just do this a
yeah,
bit better? Here's tips of how to do it better." But that doesn't mean necessarily you're a terrible person, you've done anything wrong. It just means the
of
person's like,
course.
"Oh, this is not exactly helping anymore. It's been a
That's
while."
actually it's actually a really good analogy because I was just thinking, as you say that even the best baker
Yeah,
has an off day
yeah.
sometimes, right? Even the best cake baker, sometimes you think, oh, I put too much salt, or I didn't put enough sugar, or I missed out an egg. So we do make mistakes, and I think that's a really refreshing, great analogy to use. I'm going to steal it from you, and I'm sure the people listening are probably going to steal it from you as well. Thank you very much. So another question, Sean. Just going on from that, creating that safe environment. Um, Sometimes there can be a bit of a disconnect between and you're a university, sure, you were a university student. I don't know if you still are, but I know you were very active in Flinders uni politics for a long time. So uh
I've re-enrolled in the last
re-enrolled. Okay,
year,
wonderful.
so that's
How
exciting.
can students and faculty what university, not just faculty, but university administrative faculty and students come together, collaborate to create some of these safe spaces and safe communities on campus? Because I know that sometimes there can be a bit of a disconnect between, what the students want and what the administration of the university can actually fulfill. Do you have any ideas on how we can bring the two groups together to maybe start to create some of these safe spaces and safe communities on campus?
I'm gonna quote the CEO of the Equality Project actually, because they kind of tackled this in a broad community sense, but talking about what the difference between a safe space and a brave space is. So there's a need for safe spaces, but a lot of times universities and public spaces, a lot of time brave spaces, and you need to be brave to participate in those spaces to show yourself and bring your whole self. I don't think every student
Sure,
brings everything about themselves to university,
of
but you
course.
are brave when you do. So acknowledging that those brave conversations have spaces exist, and but it doesn't need to be unsafe spaces either. So you can make it a place where people have the option to share and bring themselves, but if they do, they are not going to be in a sense of harm. But there's a difference between harm and uncomfortable. And I'm a big believer in having uncomfortable conversations, but not harmful conversations. And
Yep,
you can decide as an individual whether engaging in something is going to be harmful to you or it's going to be uncomfortable. But a lot of the time, I think people are afraid of uncomfortability and having
sure.
a conversation with someone who might not know stuff. Um, so, like for me, I have had to have lots of conversations with people who have no idea what I'm talking about, have no context. And there might be someone here like,
Yeah,
what in the world is Sean going on about? And so we have to have an uncomfortable conversation where they're going to share experiences that they've had that have shaped their worldview. And it might be a bit uncomfortable because they might not fully understand why those things happen and have kind of deducted some reasons. That can be uncomfortable for me, but it could be harmful for someone who is just realizing their identity. And it's a very, very vulnerable spot for them. And they're feeling like they're being challenged on who they are. For me, I don't see it as that. I see it as a learning opportunity and a journey.
yeah,
So there is a space for conversations where people can actually go, "Hi, I have no idea what's going on. Do you have any information? Could you actually help me understand how I can support my friends or family or someone I know or classmates?" Because if you don't give the stepping tools for people to have those uncomfortable conversations, you can't get from like the bottom of the staircase to the top without some type of, getting up the stairs. Or if you can
yeah,
provide the tools as a university, it can be an escalator, right? And so it means that sometimes, even within your own community, you're going to have people who disagree, and it's going to be an uncomfortable tension. And there's going to be tension if people disagree on the best way to do things. And I'm sure you have it in meetings and group assignments, whatever you're doing. There's going to be an uncomfortable moment where you're like, "We clearly have a different opinion here."
mm,
That's not necessarily harmful. It can be annoying, it can be frustrating, but it can actually work out to be something really productive. So when you're meeting someone at the university who might at first start to come at a complete opposite angle or may disagree with you, acknowledging that it's uncomfortable, but going and sharing that you might have a common goal and finding where you both connect. I always have a
yeah,
challenge when I come into a room where I think this person's going to disagree with me. Finding that point in common and working from there is always the best spot. So going, well, if you're meeting with me, you probably want to make the place more inclusive. You might just disagree on how we get there.
How we
So
get
I'm
there.
going to see how you think it could be more inclusive. And then when I find something that I agree with, I go, cool, we share that commonality. Let's build on that. And then I kind of go, well, if you think this will help, why won't this help? And then eventually you can take them on a learning
Yeah.
journey from the bottom of the stairs to the top of the stairs. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you're someone who is having a really bad day, that might be a harmful conversation and maybe not a good idea. And there are some people who aren't going to learn and they're not there and they're not meeting you in the middle or wanting to have a meaningful connection, and you might not find that connection and it might just be a harmful conversation. But learning to identify the difference is really important, because if, say, you had an assignment that was really stressful, that's uncomfortable, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily always harmful. And it's sometimes useful to overcome that stress and learn that you can actually do that, or you can pass the exam, or you can navigate these things. And it can give you a really big confidence to keep going in your life. So being willing to be uncomfortable is really important, but not be willing to be harmed. And that
Yeah.
also comes the difference between a safe space is a place where you probably aren't going to be uncomfortable and you probably aren't going to be harmed. And that's important to have, and having those pockets of the world where you can be with people who are really supportive. But if you only have that, you create a bubble. So having this kind of staircase approach of different environments is really important, because a lot of the people that I've met that sometimes are the most exclusionary turn out to actually be part of the community, and that's their journey. And they get from one side to the complete other side,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're actually end up being advocates within the community. So giving that opportunity for people to go on that journey is important as an institution. You as an individual, if you're someone like a student, you might not necessarily need to build that scaffolding, and you might be in need of that scaffolding. But when thinking it from like an institutional way, having a scale from safe space, brave spaces is important, so that then people can participate and have conversations and go on the journey together. Because it's not just the members of the community that can make a place inclusive, it's about everybody. So providing
That's
that
great.
scaffolding is
Thank you.
basically
And look,
crucial.
going on from that, how do you so one of the issues that I face sometimes personally, not just at work at times, personally, is trying to bridge that gap between uh the cultural awareness sort of gap, right? So let me just explain a bit more. So I have some friends who I've known for 20 or 30 years who come from quite conservative cultural backgrounds. And after all these years of friendship, I guess they accept me to an extent, but they don't accept my lifestyle whatsoever. So, and I know certainly that that issue certainly happens in the student population. There are some students who come from a very conservative background, and sometimes they struggle with seeing things like pride flags around on campus, or it could be a pride meeting going on or something. How can we try and it's a difficult conversation, and it's probably a very difficult question to ask, but what can we do to try and start to bridge that gap to at least, we're not necessarily trying to, make people overnight, understand, but how can we try to crack the wall that sort of separates us sometimes, just so we can see a little bit through and start to have some of these brave conversations, as you say?
So I was spending about 5 weeks in rural America about over the last couple of months, and
Yeah,
I found that one incredibly challenging, because there are a lot of people with loaded weapons who were definitely willing to yell quite offensive things at me. But at the same time, in a town of 1,000 people, where 85 to 90% of the people voted for Trump in the last election, and they have flags that say "F your feelings," they're actually
yeah,
all over the place.
yeah,
And I was like, how is this going to be? How am I going to feel safe? Had a drag show, had a drag brunch on a Sunday morning every Sunday, and most of the town would attend, which absolutely
that's
just
great.
confused me. I was sitting here being like,
Yeah,
you have all these opinions, but you're safe in this environment. And what I found out was that community, and I ended up meeting, getting to know all the artists and the people and the
yeah,
organizers. And their approach is they also run the local food bank. They also participate in the
okay,
community and give back and are a part of the broader community. And I find that allowing it to not just be about LGBT stuff, but about broader well-being and broader happiness and broader relationships and participating in the conversation and being a part of it. That takes the organization to be willing to do it, but because nobody was doing it in that town, the LGBT community people were the only people doing it.
Right.
But in a sense of an organization like yourselves, making sure that there are that community at the part of every table participating in making sure that people's religious backgrounds are supported and protected, making sure that people from different cultures are protected and supported, and being a part of their celebrations and being a part of their community and still being who you are breaks down that a lot. It is still, once again, being brave, and we're going back on the
Sure.
brave type of stuff. It's not necessarily a safe situation,
Yeah.
but it is still like a really great way to make those changes inadvertently. I'm a big believer in running community gardens run by the LGBT community in the local area that provide affordable food for things. And that's a project that I'm working on in South Australia at the moment, and other projects like that that allow people to come into the community and be a part of it. But it's not just necessarily being in a pride parade and going to a gay bar, like actually making it a community and focusing on that aspect, because they are all students. You probably might end up in a group assignment with them. You might end up in a class with them. They're going to be your peers. And if it's a sense of community, you start to go, oh, we're really similar, and it breaks down that wall. It doesn't mean that necessarily they have to engage. And there are some people that division in their mind benefits them and that separation is useful and they're never going to accept that. But for those who are confused, unsure, being like, this is very unusual to me, if they're coming up to you being like, I want to help you, it breaks down that stigma. My biggest target demographic at the moment, so I do LGBTQ work 1 day a week, I do the broad everybody, is like incel men that believe women are the responsible for everything, seemingly work best with me because I approach them being like, I want to help you. How do I help you find meaning? And it just breaks down that idea that I'm against them, or that I have an issue with who they are or what their beliefs are. And the moment they see that, they go, well, why do I have an issue with what your beliefs are? How do you see the world? And they start asking those questions, and then they go and look at it going, is the reason I didn't get a job at KFC because of women, or is it because I turned up with clothes with stains on them? And I was like, maybe it might be that.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
Oh, and you have those light bulb, like that shift from someone who's very against to for, because you've just met them where they are and giving them that opportunity to learn. And it's terrified me at first, but it is so rewarding to watch that journey happen now. It's not a job for everybody, but it is a job that is interesting to be a part of.
So what you're saying is, I guess, broadening the conversation and maybe not having it so specific about something, and sort of broadening the conversation and saying, well, this is what unites us all regardless, right? So let's have that conversation, and then maybe, you know, through talking and some shared experiences and etc., we can start to break down some of those walls naturally.
Because there's like probably 5 types of people. There are people that are never going to support you. There are people that are like, I don't like you very much. There are people that are like, I'm indifferent. There are people that are vaguely supportive, and there are people that have got your back no matter what. The goal is to move them all one. It's not to get someone from here to here. It's about just moving them one step along.
One side, yeah.
At the same time, what you'll find is I'm not saying like the LGBT community need to do all the work here. I'm not saying they need to turn up and help run all their events for them. Those communities are already active. You just got to participate.
Yes.
Right? Come along, go have fun. It can be a really rewarding experience. And at the same time, hopefully they will in turn come along to your experiences. And that change is a really good way to do it in a positive way. But it doesn't mean don't turn up to your organizational challenge your university to do better and work with your university to do better and to reform policies. These are all parts of the pie that need to be existing. They're not just exclusive parts of the conversation. I don't think if you just attended all the events of a specific community that suddenly inequality will evaporate. But
of course,
all these things going on, and different people trying different ways that suit who they are and how they operate. There are some amazing activists who are protesters and will be out on the street and will challenge and do sit-ins and all type of stuff, and they're brilliant at that. And there are some people that's not their vibe. So providing different tools for people to go on the same journey is really important.
Wonderful. Sean, one more question before we go. We've got a Kahoot, which you're welcome to stay for. We got a bit of a quiz, which you're welcome to try and stay for and see if you can compete. But one final question before we go is, and this is a question, I guess, you know, I think I asked you something very similar last year, but you've given us a lot of, you know, amazing advice today, and certainly supported some of us in our conversations that we might be having with fellow staff or with students or even with our friends. What last advice, right, could you give to staff who really want to be allies and who really want to try and contribute to that sort of safe, inclusive space that I've been talking about?
I think that if you don't know, like doing your own research, I just also want to mention that I saw in the chat um, Lauren's comment about how draining and exhausting it can be. If you're an ally and you can go and Google it yourself and put in the work to make it safe for other people, that's the best way to do it. If you can go out of your way and go, I've heard you use this terminology, I'm going to go out of my way and learn myself and figure out how to be better and understand it. That is like the best you can do. As I said, if you mean well, that's a large part of it, but it can still be incredibly exhausting for someone to explain it all and put it all on them. But also going to other people who you know who are allies, going, how does this work? How does this work? And working together to do it. There's a really great example as I went to Riverland Pride in Berry in the Riverland. And what they had is because they felt unsafe walking down the main street of that town, they had all the allies with lollies and gifts and little giveaways all stand on a footpath and they all walk down there to support them. But the allies had coordinated that and organized that event for the LGBT community. And that's, you know, taking that work away and doing it yourself is a great way to be supportive and can be really fun. But it's still important that, like, yeah, safe spaces 100% are important and exist. But allies where they can do the work to support people and take the load off is the best way to be an ally. You know, like if you're holding a part of it, it's also important to, like, my mum, for example, thinks she is the best ally in the world. She went up to someone at her workplace and said, my son is queer, I should speak at Wear It Purple Day because they're a part of Wear It Purple, to a lesbian co-worker. And my mum came home and said, why wouldn't they let me speak at the event? And I was like, because there are other people in the community for it. She's like, am I being excluded? I'm like, no, it's not about you. It's not for you. You already have many days that represent who you are and what you need. This is their space. Please don't. Mum took forever to understand that. But understanding that you're the structural being there to hold up the people that need support, not so much the person that's being held up by it, is also important. But that's where you can, put in that bit of extra effort. But also I come across it in a way of, isn't it cool that this diversity exists? When I watch a nature documentary, I'm like, and they zoom in and there's like little bugs and all these things going on underground that I don't know about. I'm like, how cool is the world so diverse and different? And there are so many different things. And the more you dig in the community, there are more labels and identities and little different parts of the community that exist that you had no idea about. And if you come in with a curious mind, it is really interesting. And that's kind of the approach I go. I'm going to scroll so many Wikipedia pages about random identities and learn about it because it's just interesting. If that's an approach you can have to it, that's one of the best ways to just be like, wow, I didn't know people had this experience. How does that match to mine? Because we're all a part of a community and you might look at it and go, oh, actually that labels me. But it's a really easy way to do that work so that people don't have to be exhausted by putting all the work to do it themselves.
That's great. Sean, thank you. You know, every time we talk, it absolutely astounds me at your knowledge and the way you so beautifully and effortlessly discuss, a lot of these things. I remember, I'm going to do my older man conversation now. I remember when I first went to uni back in 19, it was really tough, right? And this is back at university, right? It was very, very tough. And we used to march at Parliament House and we used to march to the lecture rooms and march to the halls and march and wave flags and banners. And it was just, coming to Lauren's point, it was exhausting. It was just like 10 years of activist work and it was exhausting. And when we went down to Tasmania, when Tasmania wouldn't repeal the discrimination laws against homosexuality, we went down there, we were boycotting Tasmania Parliament. It was a very, very difficult time. And, I compare things today and I see people like you and I was a lot less attractive version of you 30 years ago, 40 years ago, right, doing the same sort of things at university, and there was just no resources around, there was no assistance, there was no one to help us, and talking to someone like you now just makes me feel really happy and really confident and really amazed at how far we've come in the last 30 or 40 years. and that we're having these conversations now was really amazing. And I'm very happy to be talking to you again today. Thank you very much for coming. I think we would love to have you back again. You really just have a wonderful way of talking, just very nice to listen to, you know, and your ideas just are very natural, and I think that's amazing. So thank you very, very much. Yeah, we are progressing as a people in a nation. That's very true. Thank you.